Self-sounders. My lecture has 6 parts. Here we go. 1, instrumentarium. 2, sound waves. 3, subjects. 4, installations. 5, meanings. And the conclusion. And there are subtitles. Instrumentarium, from idea to hardware. Sound waves, physics, aesthetics. Subjects, bioalgorithms. Installations, synthesis and empowerment. Meanings, tipping points, a manifesto. And conclusion, RR. First, instrumentarium, from idea to hardware. The motor drum, 32 motorized beaters are arranged in a circle around the drum head. The motors can be controlled with extreme digital precision. This principle can be applied to any circular percussion instrument, for example, also a hi-hat or a bass drum or a tam-tam, or multiple drums, for example, 5 synchronized drums could also be arranged in an ensemble. The thunder sheet machine, die Donnerblechmaschine, sheets of various materials such as aluminium, silver, copper, stainless steel, brass, etc., and in different sizes from 5 to 10 centimeters up to 1 by 2 meters, and different thicknesses from really ultra thin 0.05 millimeter foils to half millimeter thick sheets are motorized to shake and bend. They are arranged in groups throughout the space. In addition, also video projection can be cast onto a sheet, or a video monitor is installed. A transducer can be attached to a sheet, turning it into a loudspeaker, or a reflective sheet create self-portrait. Piano arrays are small MIDI keyboards played robotically. Each keyboard unit also functions as a visual building block for various arrangements. And the keyboards can be mapped with samples as desired. Wind instruments, literally wind machines, such as leaf blowers or hair dryers, which are machine controlled in terms of on and off and intensity and thus pitch. Wind can be composed spatially, for example, arranged around the audience. An additional participatory element is 3D printed glissando flutes, designed as double flutes with slightly different lengths, producing a dissonant interval with difference tone when blown into. By chance, I do have an example here. And the audience can pick them one and also join the wind. The equilibraphone, motorized rails along which glass or other wooden or metal spheres roll. Resonators of varying sizes under the rails produce different pitches and timbres. These can be arranged systematically, as you can see here. So this is a big resonator, and here is a tiny one, and the last one, the Discant, does not have a resonator. So can be arranged in such a systematic way from high to low, or more playfully. It is also be conceivable in a large scale, an entire room filled with these seesaws. The ruminating machine, die Grübelmaschine, so now moving towards more specific sonic semantics. Coarse and fine thoughts are churned here. The coarse down sounds much harsher than the fine granulate. And one could imagine this on an even larger scale as well. Entire containers then, where huge scoops churn different materials with a crunching sound, an audible think tank, so to speak. Or the Sigh machine, die Seufzmaschine. Multiple CNC machines with superballs and mirrors. The motors rub the superballs against the smooth surfaces of the mirrors, producing a moan-like sound gesture. One might recognize one's own emotional state reflected in it. Motor flexatons, 7 mallets struck by motors against flexatons, which themselves are bent to varying degrees by motor power. The friktara, a rubbophone, metal balls are dragged by motors over 3D printed rods of varying sizes, thicknesses, and heights. As with the other instruments, the elements can be arranged in different configurations, tower-like, or as a screen, or as individually placed friction boards in all sorts of constellations. A foundational statement of conceptual art, which I have been close to for nearly 20 years, says, "The idea is a machine that produces the work of art," sentenced by Sol LeWitt. But the autonomous process, the one decoupled from direct intervention, is not only found in the realm of conceptual art, it's literally present in a machine-based art that follows the laws of physics, produces the physical, and translates it into the metaphysics. Conceptual music carried a certain logocentrism and now plays beside it a deliberate materialism. Heating molecules, scraping through frequencies, thought vibrating yet standing still, a staggering point, the knots in space and time, the beating of hearts, everything has its frequency, its oscillation, its restlessness. And also a consequence of conceptual art, think fundamentally, push the boundaries and reframe things. Now not only compose music, but build instruments and conceptualize them or think them differently than usual human performance. So thus the connection to robotics becomes obvious. I will later show how these motorized instruments look and sound in action, of course. But for me, the invention and construction of motor musical instruments is explicitly also about visual design. They must meet aesthetic standards as exhibition objects. No cable chaos, no DIY look. So these are genuine sculptures, spatial installations. Example, the motor drum. It is one drum, so every strike on it sounds almost the same. So in theory, I could work with just one single stick. That would suffice, one could think. But with these 32 sticks arranged in a circle, I can also work choreographically. And yet, sonically, it is more nuanced. I can draw out different colors by varying the number of beaters striking simultaneously. And if you listen closely, different strikes are heard at different positions, more left or more right, so creating a stereo effect when standing near. Some sticks can maintain permanent contact with the membrane, damping it, while others strike. So the instrument offers enough expressive range to be considered fully a veritable instrument for which I, or theoretically others, can compose various pieces. Sound waves, physics aesthetics. Since 2013, I've been creating sheet music paintings. So that's how these ones look like. So it's this structure of title and a minimalistic arrangement of notational elements referring to art history sometimes, and or also working with photos, or then I did also ones with much more sheet music elements. Yeah, or this sheet music code book. And then some of them I've really painted then in oil on canvas and did then show them in exhibitions, or also other application on postcards, etc., etc. But in the iconography of sound and music, a remarkable shift has taken place over the last 10 years. While musical notes were previously the most common icons, stylized sound waves are now more frequently seen for voice messages, podcasts, and audio streaming platforms. This is the cover of the recently awarded German Book Trade Prize for novels. Yeah, and the Lumina poster as well shows a sound wave. The musical note is a symbol from the written tradition of music, a simplified reference to a score, to composition, to the interpretation of sound. The stylized sound wave, on the other hand, originates from the visual world of recording technology, oscilloscope, waveform editor, digital track in a sequencer, where the musical note is abstract. The wave is concrete. It shows an imprint of the sound itself, a document of the event, not its concept. One could say that this shift in icons reflects the movement from the composed to the recorded, from the work to the stream, from musical setting to sonification. Musical note icons point to something that still needs to be interpreted. Sound wave icons, on the other hand, assert immediacy. Here, this is the sound itself. A paradigm shift from the score as instructions to the audiophile as reality. The sound wave is no longer an interpretation of a work, but the work itself, so to speak. It documents the unique acoustic moment, whereas the note embodied the reproducible idea. In a culture of sampling, remixing, and voice messages, the concrete sonic progression becomes more important than its abstract notation. So, since 2021, I've been creating images and sculptures from and with sound waves. So here are some examples. So this can look like this, or here I've scratched into oil paint, like sound would not go through air but through paint, or in a more quasi hand-scribbled minimalistic way. Or here this is created with a plotter, and here a combination of very detailed sound waves as well as in a very low resolution particles. Also here quasi air particles. Sound is contraction and extraction of air particles. So here the moment of extraction, something opens. Or here again scratched into oil paint, or here radio waves. This is Psy poems, so I use the word Stöhn here, arranged it in these various groups, so it's something between, well, a poem and a graphic. Well, this is my Soundwave sketchbook. I also made then sculptures with 3D prints. So this is the spoken word no. It's a 3D print on a Euro palette. So if somebody just doesn't understand, did you get it now? No. Materialize your opinion. Or here this is a size. So I've made a whole exhibition project on size. So here as an adjective, this is then a size, or this is a whole wall of size. Then in the, or here. This metal is just this size. As well as here is also a sai here depicted with wooden sticks and in a corner, or yeah. And so I do show these works now in exhibitions. Representing sound as an amplitude curve over time in a Cartesian coordinate system abstracts the pressure and density fluctuations in an elastic medium, usually in air, that create the perception of sound in the biological ear. So this is basic physics. But it's not just that, it's how your vocal cords vibrate. Speaking is trembling, every sound is a rapid succession of loud and soft, pressure and counter-pressure, the displacement of a stretched medium. The Vitruvian man is in a state of vibration. Sound shown as a wave reveals its visually aesthetic richness. Subjects, bioalgorithms. Now, music and movement. This is the first piece from the 6-part cycle, Sticks for Motor Drum. The piano arrays in various arrangements. The equilibraphone, listen closely so you hear the different timbres due to the different sizes of the resonators beneath the rails. And additionally, here also plays a motorized thunder sheet. Instruments that sound on their own are called idiophones in organology. This concept is taken further. Here they sound on their own because they play themselves. Bends for motorflexaton, that's the first piece from this cycle. The ruminating machine ruminates. The musical instrument as subject, from tool to counterpart. The sighing machine, how it sighs. Under development, the clustronome, a kind of cluster of crabs that, for example, beat inside a grand piano. That could also beat on a body or on a tabletop guitar. And the friktara sings with friction, dragging and dropping. Are these subjects entities on their own? Of course, I programmed, respectively composed all of this. These things certainly don't have consciousness. But is everything then just an illusion of life or liveliness? Just as 25 images per second appear as movement, 25 individual acoustic impulses per second appear as a sound. A pitch is a rapid rattle. A pixelated staircase with high enough resolution appears as a diagonal. The discrete becomes continuous, the large number is no longer countable. An alchemy is at work in human perception. When programming an enemy for a first-person shooter video game, the enemy shouldn't just move back and forth, that would be too boring and too predictable, but it also shouldn't just randomly jump around from one point to another. So a mixture of predictable movements and a touch of sometimes random changes in direction makes it appealing for the player. Beyond a certain level of complexity, it becomes realistic. If it's an illusion, then it's astonishing that it works and what we interpret into it in terms of intentionality, once the complexity of the algorithm has overcome the uncanny valley. Bioalgorithms, neural networks, at a certain point, we can no longer tell whether it's real movement or just a simulation of it. Today's artificial intelligence systems, trained on billions of data points, merge discrete neuron activations into fluid dialogues, where the quantity of parameters, often in the trillions, generates the quality of the interaction. At a sufficient resolution, it becomes identical to actual consciousness for us. And conversely, what we call human consciousness, the soul, the mind in the machine, is perhaps merely the infinitely fine, infinitely complex pixel staircase of our own neurological and biological program. The quantum fluctuations of our neurons, the epigenetic switches, the cultural imprints, all these would be the infinitesimally small steps that, in their totality, create such a dense, coherent continuum that we experience the illusion of free choice, of subjectivity, and of the soul as reality. The realization would then not be that we create consciousness, but that we expose our own consciousness as a higher resolution, illusion, and everyday ontology as a result of technical composition. Also, how much of this is subjectively composed by me, conceived by me? Isn't a great deal of this effective precisely because of its own inherent quality? All of this is listened from the material, wrested from it. I merely extract this, write it down. We believe we are working a material. In reality, we are activating it. We trigger a chain of decisions within it over which we have only limited control. The paint determines how it seeps into the fibers of the canvas. The sound determines how it resonates in space. The artist is the initiator of an action whose consequences are determined solely by the material. The material forgets nothing. Every material is trapped in a state of potential. The block of marble is a trapped wave. The wooden board, a suffocated forest. The printer's ink, a frozen river. The artist doesn't work with a neutral material, but rather with an archive of past forces and physical potentiality. His task is primarily to uncover these stored powers, not to impose his own. And cultural products like language or the justice system can also be seen as evolutionary products. Installations, synthesis and empowerment. My most recent work is a exhibition and an installation, a composition of 44 minutes with 66 motorized metal sheets, 7 wind blowers, video projection, paintings and sculptures. Shown at Ultima Oslo at Musica Strasbourg this autumn. The program note says, a large-scale installation that transforms sound and wind into a sensory and political experience. Visitors enter a space filled with motorized thunder sheets and leaf blowers, creating a composed landscape of storm, howl, breath, and vibration. The piece confronts the audience with the aesthetics of intensified air between force and resistance, nature and technology. It invites reflection on the ambivalence of natural phenomena and their political implications, particularly with regards to climate change and human-made geology. Especially 3D printed visuals allow visitors to actively join the storm of sound through their own exhalation. The piece merges physical phenomenality with expressive tension, drawing a seismographic portrait of our current fears and perceptual crisis. An invitation to move, to listen, and to exhale. Here's a few excerpts. For the spring, I've shown this work, an exhibition and a happening or performance called Seufz, Sigh, at Wittner Tage für Neue Kammermusik in the Märkisches Museum Witten. Painting, sculptures and motor instruments, and a performance by a death metal singer and an exhibition guide. Program text. The last 2 years have offered a rich archive of sighs. I noticed it in myself, how often the micro-complaint escaped me. Push notifications from the soul. An interesting sound, after all, which exists in numerous sonic and semantic variations. The sigh of relief, the suppressed sigh, the passive-aggressive sigh, the audible eye roll, as a precursor for an explosion of rage, the sigh of thought, the nocturnal existential sigh, a small rebellion, sigh, groan, moan, from comic book language to chat. Every sigh tells its own story. I created libraries of sighs. I was sighing together material, expressing it and printing it out in 3D, drawing and painting the wave's progression, and finally saving it in an exhibition format. Since the pandemic, I've been working with the sound wave as an aesthetic object, a form of sound existing between physical objectivity and an expressive seismograph. This embodies the imperative of scientific rigor, follow the science, which must be upheld in the face of so much irrationality in the world, but which, as a work of art, also has its own affective dimension. A trembling between data and drama. This project is situated within this duality. Posters expressing blatant, ironic discontent hang throughout the city. On the sidewalk, one traverses a course of oscillographic asphalt. Sigh sculptures stand in the exhibition space, laid down and cooled, while a death metal singer professionally practices the art of vomiting his soul out. A sighing machine takes over, a ruminating machine rummage through coarse and subtle thoughts. Sighing poems adorn the museum's apse, and the crawler dissects sighs into their atomic components, like a vocal surgeon performing open heart surgery on despair. And finally, everyone is invited to take a really good sigh. Here are some excerpts.
Sie hören ja so viel Musik bei den Festivals, hören Sie mal sich selber zu, hören Sie mal in sich selber hinein. Tino Opala, Ulrike Kierke Ziesig. Der Künstler hat hier für die ganze Ausstellung viele Seufzer gesammelt, das Ganze sich sozusagen erseufzt. Überhaupt gibt es so ein diverses Repertoire, das kann in Form dann von einer Welle visualisiert sein oder auch wieder hinten in Öl geritzt als Striche von unterschiedlicher Dichte. Wir haben so mit Luftpartikeln, die kontrahieren und extrahieren. Oder unten steht auch eine Skulptur, die Mary. Da sind radiale Wellen, also wenn Schall sich im Dreidimensional ausbreitet, breitet es sich auch kugelförmig aus. Auch eine motorisierte Trommel, motorisierte Keyboards. Und das hier, das ist die Grübelmaschine. Wir sehen ja, wohin der kollektive Irrationalismus führt. Das führt natürlich zu Dingen wie Verschwörungstheorien, zu Religionen, zu Nationalismen, zum Schmerz.
The exhibition format is, I would say, empowering. Instead of being imprisoned on a seat, like in concert hall or like you are now, the audience creates their own unique experience in an exhibition format. And as an artist, this allows for far more radical approaches, more minimalistic ones, for example. In the worst case scenario, the viewer quickly moves on, but the pressure on the artist to be entertaining, to be overly responsible with the audience's time is removed. And I also like this challenge as a composer. The door is always open, yet with my composition, I still want to make people stay. Meanings, tipping points, manifesto. Aura in the storm. The triumph of algorithms does not lead to total dematerialization. On the contrary, in a dialectical twist, the algorithms bring about the return of the material world with redoubled force, conjuring physical reality as the new gold standard. In clubs, DJs once again stack mountains of analog gear, wiring dozens of devices into labyrinthine setups. A single laptop could replicate all these sounds with more precision and far less effort. But that's no longer the point. What matters now is the spectacle of the physical, an aesthetic of effort, of force, matter, time. Sound is not just vibration, it is resistance. So it goes with art. In the age of synthetic reproduction, anyone can walk through an exhibition, snap a few photos, and let an AI generate 1 million variations, some of them arguably better than the original. But the real question becomes, what actually stands there? What has been made real, materially present, and resistant enough to infinite variation, that a viewer might still assign it the value it actually has? Art demands materialization, and with it, ever stronger mechanisms of exclusivity, like the Bitcoin, whose value is propped up by algorithmically enforced energy consumption. The more electricity the blockchain delivers, the more precious the coin becomes. Artificial intelligence calls for artificial scarcity. At the same time, matter forces itself upon us. Nature rises as subject with unprecedented might. The pandemic was just a prologue. The battered proletariat of ravaged resources, clear-cut rainforests, and poisoned oceans strike back with the guillotines of weather, drought, heat, flood, violence without emotion or ideology. Virtuality was a brief episode. The world never stopped being hardware. In this inferno, the one weapon we possess is science. Science is our finest tool when the world begins to burn. And we are surrounded by the masterpieces of science, pocket computers, wireless data, vaccines. Yet many people take them for granted while denying the very principles that made such comforts possible. This gives us climate change deniers, pandemic belittlers, nostalgists, religious fundamentalists. Too much tolerance is granted to collective irrationality. In private, one may believe in horoscopes, angels, homeopathy, or energized water. But when collectives, when politics, when masses cling to afterlife fictions, national myths, divine consolation, the result is irrational, anti-modern, authoritarian politics. Art takes its place alongside science. Does it want to decorate the apocalypse or be part of reality processing? Does it want to cast light or induce fog? The search for better building materials, more efficient batteries, and innovative cooling systems is not a purely technical task, but a cultural and ethical challenge. Art is needed as a laboratory for reality under other conditions, as a sensorium of the coming, as provocation of perceptual crisis, as repertoire of thinking's cunning. Art is reason's radical supplement, as sensual epistemology. It claims imagination for dense experience, for forms for the formless, and creates meaning through the argument of beauty. Its essence is insistence. Conclusion: RR. The instruments, images, and sculptures are materialized arguments in, I must reiterate, a populist and anti-science era we are living in. Every beat of the drum is an insistence on physics, a chain of molecules rubbing against one another. Every thunderclap is a reminder that air has mass, that vibration is measurable, that the world remains hardware. When the ruminating machine rolls its stones, when the sighing machine groans, when the composed wind storms, when the self-sounders play themselves, it means the world is also playing itself, with us, against us, without us. We must learn to live with an environment that no longer functions according to our plans. Nature contradicts us with droughts, floods, storms. Technology contradicts us with algorithms we can no longer understand. Matter contradicts us with tipping points we can no longer reverse. What is expressed here, what can be expressed here, is insistence, solidified composition. My compositions are hardware. The sound fades away, the instruments remain. The sound wave remains lying on the floor. I have always been against acting for action, against illusion, and for presence. Not a game, but art as the ultimate aesthetic case. The aesthetics of physics builds resonant substance, not headsets. Not sound design, but sound as action, sound that strikes. I want to crash, want to fall against the harshness of the composition, freeze against the cold tone, sweat against the difficult idea, as an elevation in the lived world, as an intensification of reality. The opposite of augmented reality and virtual reality is RR, radical reality. Thanks for your attention.